The billionaire who mocked traditional healers lay dying in the wreckage. His helicopter crashed, his pilot dead, his legs shattered, and the only person who could save him, the village herbalist he had laughed at hours before. Would Mama Amma save the man who called her backward? Or let Karma teach him what money can't buy? Stay with me. Kwame wasn't always like that. Is that what you wish to hear? No. The truth cuts deeper. He had always been like this. Proud, arrogant, cold. His chin perpetually raised, as if the very ground beneath him wasn't worthy of his shadow. As if the air his people breathed was too common for his lungs. And now his pride had dragged him back to the village whose name he had erased from his tongue like a shameful stain. The same soil that raised him from nothing, that fed him, sheltered him, made him, he now called backward. It all began the day he descended from the sky like a god who had forgotten he was once human. The wind came first, a violent, unnatural wind that scattered market wrappers and sent chickens fleeing in panic. Mamaya's freshly hung laundry whipped off the line. Children playing football froze mid-kick. Then came the sound, the mechanical roll, whoop, 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 rolling over tin roofs like approaching thunder, shaking the very bones of the village. Kwame! Kwame has come! Children screamed, pointing at the sky. Old men shielded their eyes against the sun's glare, squinting upward. Women with wet hands from pounding fufu stopped mid-swing, pestles suspended in disbelief. The last time anyone here saw a helicopter was on Mama Amma's crackling television 5 years ago during the president's visit to the city. A distant, impossible thing. But this noise wasn't coming from a screen. This was real, and it landed in their village. The helicopter descended over the old school field, its blades crushing the air, flattening the grass, sending dust spiraling in angry clouds that stung eyes and coated tongues. Inside sat Kwame Adeyemi, 28 years old, billionaire, glowing with success, dripping in gold, chains at his neck, watches on both wrists, rings that caught the sunlight like tiny suns. He gazed down through the tinted glass at the gathering crowd below and allowed himself a small, satisfied smile. Let them see, he muttered to himself. Let them see what I have become. The pilot said nothing. He had learned early that Mr. Adeyemi didn't hire him for conversation. The blade slowed. The dust began to settle. The door opened. Kwame stepped out. His Italian leather shoes, worth more than most villagers made in a year, pressed into the red dust of the school field. He paused, looked down, frowned. Then with a deliberate slowness, he pulled a crisp white handkerchief from his breast pocket and bent to brush the dust from his soles, as if the very earth that breathed him was now a contaminant. The villagers saw that small act, and they whispered, "He doesn't want our land to stain his shoes," one woman murmured, a voice heavy with something between hurt and understanding. "He has changed," another said, shaking her head slowly. "Our Kwame has changed." But they gathered around him anyway, clapping and cheering, because it was still their son, still the boy who once ran barefoot through these same streets. "Kwame, our son, welcome home. Our rich son has returned. Look how far he has gone." Kwame raised one hand, not in greeting, but in acknowledgement, like a king receiving tribute from his subjects. "Good afternoon," he said. Even his accent had changed. The village rhythm stripped from his tongue, replaced by something clipped and foreign, the words of someone who had learned to speak like money sounds. Chief Adebayo, tall and regal in his traditional agbada, stepped forward with a warm smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. He had known this boy since birth. He had watched him grow, had celebrated his scholarships and success. "Kwame, my son, the chief said, his voice carrying the weight of both welcome and gentle reproach. "We are happy you came for the festival. 10 years is not 10 days." Kwame's smile was practiced, perfect, empty. "I came as soon as my meeting ended, Chief. Important people were waiting for me in the city." He paused, letting the words hang in the air like smoke. "You know, deals worth more than this entire village." The silence that followed was sharp enough to cut. A few elders exchanged glances, slow, deliberate, heavy with unspoken judgment. The chief's smile froze on his face like cracked clay. Still, the drummers began. The talking drums spoke their ancient language. Boom tak tak, boom tak tak, boom tak tak, boom tak tak. And dancers circled around Kwame in a whirl of color and dust. Their feet pounded the earth in rhythm, raising red clouds with every stomp. The festival had rolled back to life, loud, colorful, pulsing with ancestral energy. The villagers had waited years for this moment. They had cooked with joy burning in their hearts. Big clay pots of egusi soup thick with ground melon seeds. Mountains of steaming fufu that stretched like clouds. Calabashes of palm wine sweet as honey and golden as sunset. It was their way of saying, "Welcome home, son. We never forgot you." But when the wooden bowls were placed before him, Kwame's face twisted. He stared at the food, at the carved wooden plates, at the people eating joyfully with their fingers, licking the soup from their thumbs, sharing from communal bowls. Then he laughed. Not softly, not kindly. Loud, sharp, cutting like broken glass. "Animals eat with their hands," he announced, his voice slicing through the celebration like a blade. "You people have refused to evolve from this nonsense culture. No forks, no spoons. What century is this?" The women froze mid-chew, fufu suspended halfway to their mouths. The men looked away, jaws clenched, shame burning hot in their chests. Even the children stopped eating, their wide eyes darting between the adults and the stranger who looked like their Kwame but spoke like someone else entirely. Mama Ama, the herbal woman with silver threading through her hair, watched from the edge of the gathering. She had helped raise this boy before he left for the city, fed him from her own pot when his parents died, prayed over him when fever nearly claimed his life, a hand cool on his burning forehead. Now, she couldn't recognize the man standing before her. Still, they smiled, politely, painfully. The chief leaned towards his wife and whispered, "Let him talk. Maybe the city taught him pride, but it will not teach us shame." Later, as custom demanded, the elders brought out a calabash wrapped in sacred cloth. Inside lay a bar of black soap, mixed with herbs, palm oil, and honey by the oldest hands in the village. It was a blessing, a gift reserved for honored guests, for sons who return home. They presented it with reverence. "Rub this in your bath, son. It will bring you peace." Kwame chuckled, a sound without warmth. He raised his perfume bottle high, letting the sunlight catch the designer label. "Peace? This is Dior, imported. I don't rub dirt on my skin." The laughter that followed wasn't from joy. It was hurt that hides deep in the chest. In that place where only silence can hear it scream. He stood tall, chest out, sunglasses glinting like mirrors that refused to show his own reflection. "Traditions like these are why you people never move forward." The chief sighed, his voice barely above a whisper. "Tradition is not backwardness, my son. It is memory." Kwame waved him off like swatting a fly. "Memory doesn't buy a mansion, chief." That night, the festival continued, but the joy had leaked out of it, like water from a cracked pot. Something strange happened the next morning. The villagers woke up to devastation. Their crops, lush and green just yesterday, now stood withered. Cassava leaves brown and brittle. Yam stems snapped and broken as if crushed by invisible hands. Women wailed, falling to their knees in the ruined fields. Men stood helpless, staring at their dead harvest with hollow eyes. It hadn't rained in weeks, yes, but this looked like something else. This looked like a curse. They called an emergency meeting under the big Iroko tree, where decisions had been made for generations. The chief spoke, his voice grave. Maybe the gods are angry. We must pour libation. We must ask for forgiveness. Kwame arrived in his gleaming car, engine pouring like a satisfied cat, sunglasses on, smelling of foreign cologne that clashed with the scent of worry sweat and dried hairs. He looked around at the desperate faces and scoffed. You people still use the same old methods? You need chemical fertilizers, irrigation systems, modern farming techniques. They listened, heads bowed, because he was educated, because he had succeeded where they had not. But he didn't stop to ask if they could afford any of it. Didn't offer to help. He only bragged about what he had learned abroad, about conferences and agricultural innovations they would never see. You people are not evolving, he said. Again, his voice slicing through the heavy silence like a machete through sugarcane. Always waiting for rain, always waiting for miracles. If you can't keep up with the modern world, stay poor. It is that simple. His ceremonial staff trembling in his weathered hand. The boy has forgotten his roots, he muttered to no one in particular. Kwame smirked, a cold, sharp expression that had nothing to do with happiness. You mean the same root that trapped people in the ground? He turned and walked away before anyone could answer, his expensive shoes kicking up dust that settled on the faces of people who had once carried him on their shoulders. The crowd dispersed quietly. No one spoke, but everyone remembered. Their hearts bruised like overripe fruits dropped on stone. And like that, whispers began. Soft at first, then louder, spreading like smoke through the village. Kwame has no respect. He talks like the white man owns his tongue. What did he even learn from all those schools? If this is how they return, maybe our children should never leave this land. Kwame didn't hear them. Or maybe he did and simply didn't care. He stood beside his helicopter that evening, chin high, shoulders squared against the judgment he refused to acknowledge. The sky blazed golden behind him, a sunset that painted him in false glory. The villagers didn't wave goodbye. They just watched him rise, the wind from his base scattering dust into their faces one final time, stinging their eyes, coating their tongues with the taste of his contempt. He smiled as he ascended, but deep down, something itched at him, a restlessness he couldn't name. It wasn't guilt. Guilt required recognizing you had done wrong. It was something else, something darker, emptier. Because pride can make a man fly, until the wind reminds him he cannot outfly graffiti. And graffiti was waiting. It happened just minutes away from the village. The same path where palm trees leaned low over the road, and the air always smelled of home, of wood smoke and red earth and memory. He was still smiling, scrolling through his phone, too sure of his own invincibility when it started. A strange choking rattle from the engine, metal grinding against metal in a way that shouldn't happen. The pilot's face shifted into panic, his knuckles white on the controls. Sir, something is wrong. Kwame barely looked up from his screen, his thumb still scrolling through emails worth millions. Handle it, I have a meeting too. The words never finished. The machine jerked, once, then twice. The world tilted sideways. Then came the roar. Fire tore through the sky like the anger of forgotten gods. A scream of metal, of man, of everything that thought it could not fall. And in a single breath, pride met dust. The wreckage landed in a lonely patch of bush, barely minutes from Mala village. The helicopter lay in pieces, its tail buried in the earth like a broken bone jutting from flesh. Smoke rose into the air, thick, black, choking, reaching for a heaven that didn't answer. Bodies were scattered across the grass like discarded toys. The pilot was silent, his neck bent at an impossible angle. The assistant moaned weakly, trapped beneath twisted metal. And Kwame Kofi, the golden son, the untouchable billionaire, lay face down in the dirt, bleeding. He tried to lift his head, but the world spun violently. Pain cracked through his ribs like lightning through a tree. His mouth filled with dust and the metallic taste of his own blood. "Help!" he whispered into the uncaring darkness, but no one came. He reached blindly for the first aid kit near the wreck, his fingers clawing at empty air. It was gone, melted, maybe, or buried under debris that had once been luxury. His voice grew weaker, his breath shallower, and in that moment, when even his gold watch couldn't shine bright enough to blind the truth, Kwame realized how small money was. Because money doesn't stop bleeding, money doesn't chase away pain, and money cannot beg the sky for mercy. At that same hour, miles away, Mama Ama was walking home from a women's meeting in a nearby village. The night was still, wrapped in that deep quiet that comes before dawn. Her feet knew the path by heart. Every root, every stone, every turn she had walked for 60 years. She carried a small woven bag of herbs over her shoulder, a traveling medicine box that had saved more lives than the hospital in town. Then she inhaled and smelled something wrong. It wasn't the sweet smoke of cooking wood, not the calm air of the village settling into sleep. It was acrid, chemical, wrong. She stopped mid-step, her heart suddenly alert. At first, she thought it was a bushfire. Farmers sometimes burned their fields at night. Then she saw it, a faint orange glow between the trees, pulsing like a wounded heartbeat. What is that?" she muttered, her voice barely above a whisper. Her heart skipped, not from fear, but from knowing something had fallen from the sky, and someone needed her. She stepped closer. The smell grew stronger. Burnt rubber, scorched metal, something sweet and terrible that made her stomach turn. Then she saw them, bodies scattered like fallen dolls across the grass. Blood, fire, twisted pieces of iron still hissing and smoking in the darkness. Her breath caught in her throat. "Chineke! God Almighty!" She dropped her bag and ran forward, her whole legs finding strength she didn't know she still had. She moved from body to body, her practiced hands checking for pulses, for breath, for any flicker of life. The pilot? Gone, his eyes staring at nothing. The assistant? Breathing. Shallow but breathing. Then she checked the last one. Kwame Adeyemi. His once white designer shirt now soaked crimson with blood. His gold watch cracked across the face but still gleaming in the firelight, mocking the fragility of the wrist it adorned. His lips moving, whispering something she couldn't hear. Prayers, maybe, or the names of people who weren't there to save him. Her heart hardened like clay left too long in the sun. For a moment, just a moment, all she remembered were his words. Animals eat with their hands. Backwards people. Village nonsense. Her eyes burned, but not from the smoke. She turned away, ready to leave, ready to let the universe finish what it had started. But then she heard it. A sound too human to ignore, too broken to walk away from. "Mama, please, help." The same mouth that mocked her medicine now begged for it. The same man who called her a bushwoman now lay helpless at her feet, his pride bleeding out into the soil he had refused to let touch his shoes. Something shifted inside her chest. Anger wrestled with compassion in the space where her heart beat steady and strong. And compassion won. Not easily, not quickly, but it won. She knelt beside him, wiped his blood-streaked face with the edge of her wrapper, and whispered, "Stay still, my son." Her hands moved with the wisdom of 60 years. She opened a small woven bag, the one he had dismissed as backward, and began to work. She mixed ground leaves with warm palm oil, her fingers moving with practiced precision. Pressed the poultice to his wounds, ignoring his sharp intake of breath. Tied his broken leg with a firm strip of cloth torn from her own wrapper, setting the bone with movements that were both gentle and unyielding. She murmured as she worked, the words sounding like prayers, like incantations, like memories passed down through generations of healers who knew that medicine lived on the earth before it ever lived in the bottles. When the pain became too much, Kwame clenched his teeth until his jaw ached. Tears rolled down his face, cutting clean tracks through the dust and blood. He wanted to scream, but his throat was too dry, his voice stolen by shock and shame. Mama Ama kept walking, sweat glistening on her forehead despite the cool night air. Her eyes never left him, watching for signs of shock, of internal bleeding, of the thousand ways a body could surrender. "You will live," she said softly, her voice carrying the weight of certainty. "Not because of who you are, but because life still has something to teach you." 4 hours passed before help arrived. An ambulance's siren finally broke the silence, its lights flashing red and white through the trees. By then, Mama Ama had stopped the bleeding and covered the wounds with her herbs, the same village nonsense that had kept him breathing when his imported cologne and designer watch could do nothing but watch him die. She helped lift him onto the stretcher, her old hands steadier than the young paramedic's trembling ones. The nurse looked down at the makeshift bandages, the herbal poultices still pressed against his wounds, and frowned in confusion. "Who treated him before we came?" Mama Ama pointed to herself quietly, her face unreadable as ancient stone. The nurse's eyes widened in disbelief. "With leaves?" Mama Ama smiled faintly, a knowing curve of her lips that held 60 years of wisdom. "It's what the earth gave me." They drove away, red lights fading into the distance, swallowed by the night. But her heart stayed heavy, because she knew the body might heal, but pride takes longer. Weeks passed in the sterile city hospital. Kwame opened his eyes to white walls and the rhythmic beeping of machines that measured whether he deserved another chance. Pain welcomed him like an old friend he had forgotten he had. At first, he didn't remember. Then slowly, the memories returned in fragments, sharp and cutting like broken glass. The laughter, the fall, the fire, the taste of his own blood mixed with village dust. He looked at his hands, bandaged, trembling, useless. The gold watch lay broken on the bedside table, its cracked face a mirror of his shattered pride. Every morning, Mama Ama came. She brought food wrapped in banana leaves, tied with raffia string, yam, egusi soup, palm oil stew that smelled like home, like memory, like everything he had tried to forget. The same meals he had once rejected with disgust. At first, he refused to eat, turning his face away like a stubborn child. Then, hunger humbled him. And as the food warmed his body, something else, something he couldn't name, warmed the cold place where his heart used to be. One day, the doctor walked in with a smile. "You are lucky," he said, flipping through the medical chart with professional detachment. "If not for that herbal treatment you received before we arrived, you wouldn't have survived. Stopped the bleeding, prevented sepsis. Whoever treated you saved your life." Kwame looked at Mama Ama sitting quietly in the corner and broke. He wept, not just from the pain, but from the shame that cut deeper than any wound. For every word he had said, for every time he looked down on the soil that had now become his salvation, for mocking the hands that held his life when money couldn't. It took months for his bones to heal, but when he walked again, he didn't walk the same way. The next time he returned to the village, he came quietly, No helicopter cutting through the sky. No bodyguards flanking his sides. No gold chains flashing in the sun like false promises. Just Kwame, a man finally naked of pride. The villagers watched in silence as he walked to the square. He stepped slow and deliberate. He bowed before the elders, truly bowed, until his forehead touched the red earth he had once refused to let stain his shoes. He apologized for his words, his mockery, his willful blindness. I was rich in money, he said softly, his voice cracking, but poor in wisdom. I wanted to teach you, but I see now that I was the one who needed to learn. The chief nodded slowly, his withered hand resting on his ceremonial staff. The sky breaks the proud, my son, not to destroy them, but to rebuild them stronger. And so, Kwame stayed. He didn't run back to the city this time, back to the life that had taught him everything except what mattered. He used his money to build a small school, one where tradition mixed with technology, where the old and new could learn from each other. He brought in laptops, projectors, and internet connections, and he invited Mama Ama to teach herbal medicine alongside the science classes. Let the children learn both, he said, his voice carrying a humility that hadn't been there before. The future needs roots and wings, and the people forgave him. Because forgiveness is what makes a wound fade without leaving a scar that poisons the soul. But one secret stayed hidden. A month later, when investigators combed through the twisted wreckage of the helicopter, the police found something that made their blood run cold. The wires had been cut. Clean, precise, deliberate. Not frayed from wear, not damaged by impact. Sabotage. They traced it back through security footage, financial records, and whispered confessions to one of Kwame's old rivals, a man he had once humiliated in a business deal, right there in the heart of Lagos, in front of investors and cameras and everyone who mattered. A man whose name he had forgotten the moment the deal closed. The fall wasn't fate alone. It was the bitter fruit of pride, watered by enemies he had made with his arrogance, nurtured by every person he had stepped on while climbing higher. Kwame said nothing when they told him. Just sat by the river that night, alone with his thoughts, staring at the reflection of his broken watch in the dark water. The face was still cracked, still frozen at the moment everything changed. And for the first time since he got back on his feet, he smiled. Not from happiness, not from relief, but from peace. The kind that comes when you finally stop running from the truth. When Mama Ama came to see him the next morning, he greeted her with both hands extended, a traditional sign of respect he had once dismissed as village theatrics. Mother, he said, his voice steady and sincere, teach me again the things I once mocked. She smiled, her eyes crinkling like folded clothes that had been washed and dried 1,000 times in the sun. The heart forgives, she said, placing her weathered hand over his, but it never forgets. Live wisely, son. Years later, people still tell the story of the rich man who fell from the sky like Icarus, his wings melted by his own pride. Of the village woman who saved him with herbs when his money could only watch him bleed. Of how a broken body can sometimes fix a broken soul, if the soul is willing to be mended. This story teaches us that the wisest people are not always the loudest. Sometimes they are the ones the world calls backward, until the world needs saving. And so, warriors, the story ends, but the lesson lives on. Kwame learned what many of us forget, that true wealth isn't measured in gold watches or helicopters, but in the wisdom to recognize value wherever it grows, even in the hands we once called backward. Mama Ama didn't save him because he deserved it. She saved him because compassion is stronger than pride. And sometimes, the greatest power we have is choosing mercy when revenge will be easier. Now I want to hear from you, my warriors. Have you ever looked down on something or someone only to realize later that they held the very wisdom you needed? Or maybe you have been the one dismissed, the one underestimated, until your moment came to prove your worth? Drop your story in the comments below. Let's learn from each other, because that is what warriors do. We grow together. If this story touched your heart, hit that like button and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Someone chasing success so hard they have forgotten where they came from. Someone who needs reminding that the loudest voice in the room isn't always the wisest. And if you are new to our village, subscribe and join the African Wealth Warriors family. Every week we bring you animated folk tales that teach the timeless virtues our elders knew. The kind of wisdom that builds wealth not just in your pocket, but in your soul. Hit that notification bell so you never miss a tale, because the next story might be the one that changes everything for you. Until next time, warriors, stay humble, stay wise, and remember, the earth forgives, but it never forgets. I am Didi, and this is African Wealth Warriors Tales. Peace and blessings.